Okay, I think we should get started. It's a little after 7. This is a meeting of the MBTA Task Force in Manchester. This is really a community forum, public forum, where we're going to spend most of the time answering questions and addressing comments that you might have. So first, by the way, this meeting is being recorded. And the first thing I'd like to do is introduce and do a roll call of the task force members who are here. So I'll just go around. Ann Harrison.
Here.
Richard Smith, Denny Hall, Nora Morse, Sandy Bodmer-Turner, Sue Philbrick, Sarah Mellish, and myself, Chris Olney. Also here is Mark Resnick, who's our town planner. So we're going to start off with Sue Philbrick giving a brief presentation, and then we're going to open it up for comments and questions. So Sue, you have the floor.
I see some of you have been following this all along, but I definitely see some new faces both in the room and online. So I'll start off with a very quick introduction. For those who are like me, before I joined the planning board, which is maybe a week before town meeting, I might try and figure out what was going on. So for those of you who are like that, and this is your first exposure to MBTA zoning, thank you for joining us. And thank you for tuning in and being here to get up to speed on the facts. The most important fact is that this MBTA zoning was not Manchester's idea. The select board didn't decide that we needed to amend our zoning law. The planning board didn't decide to do this. The state decided to do it. The legislature passed a law about 3 years ago unanimously, and it applies to Manchester as well as 76 other towns, all served by the MBTA. And what the law requires of Manchester is not building, not development, don't have to build anything anywhere ever, but it requires that we amend our zoning bylaw. We amend our zoning bylaw so that we locate a certain number of areas in town where multifamily housing suitable for families with children can be developed if a property owner chooses to do so by right. And our zoning doesn't have that provision now, so we have to amend our zoning to follow this law. So the law itself, it's just a page, it's not that complicated, but there are guidelines, which are several pages, and they're pretty complicated. And in fact, there's a computer model that goes along with the guidelines. And so for the past year, a group of 9 Manchester residents have been working to figure out the best way for Manchester to comply with this zoning, to come up with a plan to comply with the law so we can amend our zoning. And our main focus was really to limit development, potential development, to as little as possible. Maybe that's not what the state wanted, but that's what we decided when we were drafting our plan. And we looked at the town. We're required to zone 37 acres. And it doesn't sound like very much. Our square miles is over 9 square miles. I mean, just a small bit. But it was very complicated because we have a lot of conservation land. It has to be privately owned land. It can't be public land. And there were lots of other requirements. Half of it had to be within a half mile of the train station. Well, we all know what that's like. That's our downtown. It's where our businesses are. It's also where the harbor is. Initially, Manchester was required to zone 50 acres, but our select board went back to the state and said half of that half-mile radius is in the ocean. And they said, okay, 37 acres for Manchester. We've been back with other requests, but those have not been as successful. So 37 acres, half within half-mile of the train station, and then another half, basically, of that 37 has to be contiguous or touching, a little bit less than that. The other requirement that's been hard for us is we can't just take an acre here, an acre there, in addition to the requirements I've already stated. The smallest that a parcel is required to be is 5 acres. So it has to be 5 acres here, 5 acres there, and then the half of our 37 around the train station. Complicated, again. So our criteria in figuring out where to site these 37 acres was number one, limit development. Number two, and really the most important, was be true to the character of our town, maintain the character of Manchester, and maintain the character of our diverse neighborhoods. You know, we have very different neighborhoods all over town. Each of them has different zoning, different size lots, different types of housing. We didn't want to really mess with our neighborhoods. We wanted to do that as little as possible. In addition, we did not want to jeopardize our vibrant downtown. Crosby's, the hardware store, restaurants. We need all of that to be a vibrant community. So that happens to be within that half mile of the train station. So we wanted to protect that. We don't want that turning into multifamily housing. And we wanted to have some guidelines, which we really don't have now for building in Manchester. We wanted to have some guidelines specific to any projects that might be constructed under this particular zoning for multifamily housing. So those were our priorities. In citing the districts, we tried to choose areas that already contained multifamily housing. So even though our zoning doesn't really allow multifamily housing as it's defined in the state law as of right, we have quite a bit of multifamily housing already in Manchester. And much of it is around downtown, happens to be within that half mile. So we tried to cite the zones in areas that already have multifamily housing because that lessens the likelihood that that multifamily housing is going to be replaced with other multifamily housing. Those were our main criteria. Any other main objectives that I'm missing?
Well, they told us we had to have a certain number of units or something like that. Right?
Well, that brings up a good point because one of the state's requirements was that our zoning had to allow for 15 residential units per acre. And so when you multiply 15 by our 37 acres, you get a whopping 559, I believe. And that just sounds, that's a lot of units. And so the way to lessen the likelihood of the development of that many units is to put the zoning, lay it over areas of town that already have multifamily housing and that have small lots, because we discovered this requirement and used it to our advantage, which I should say, what we tried to do is take the law and the guidelines and sort of bring them out so that what came out was the most advantageous to Manchester, not to developers, not to the state, but to our town. And so the 559 units. So one of the requirements is if you zone over a lot, let's take the Essex County Club, for example. If you zone over a lot you have to zone over the entire lot. You can't just cut off a 5-acre parcel. Because we thought, that'd be great. Essex County Club, privately owned. It's not within the half mile, but it's close. Maybe we could zone over a piece of that. That's not gonna be sold anytime soon to a group of developers. But that wouldn't work because it's over 180 acres. So you multiply that by 15 units an acre, and you get 2,700 new residential units right in the middle of town, and that doesn't follow our criteria of honoring the nature of the neighborhood or the character of the town. So that was another really hard requirement to work with, was you can't chop up a lot. So we determined that if we zoned over small lots and areas that already contain multifamily housing, we would have the best likelihood of minimizing development. But we also did want to have an opportunity for some housing, but we didn't want it all to be downtown. 37 acres around the downtown would just be a huge amount of density. So we followed the requirements of the guidelines in terms of the half-mile circle around the train station and the contiguous areas. But the rest of it, we put on the other side of 128, near the MAC on Beaver Dam Road, on the storage business, which is a very successful private storage business on a piece of land that's already developed. And the person who's running the business right now has no intention of turning it into multifamily housing. So that's one of the areas we chose. You can see the others on these maps. And maybe Tiffany, for those who are in Zoom land, if you could start with the Lower Pine to Powder House, be great. So I think those of you who came in, you should have these maps in the materials you picked up. But if not, feel free to just walk up and look at them while I'm talking so you can see what I'm talking about. Chris actually is going to talk a little bit about how this district works.
Okay, so this is Lower Pine and, well, it's actually, and Powder House. So we broke this district into two sub-districts because they contain two very different kinds of properties. So the red area going down Pine Street and includes Morse Court and a little bit of Elm Street. This is more traditional residential development. The blue areas already have multifamily housing in them. This blue area is Newport Park, which is owned by the Housing Authority. Got 32 units of senior restricted housing on it. This is Powder House Apartments. It has 29 units, I think in 4 buildings, maybe 5 buildings. Again, it's already existing multifamily, so any change would be just to improve that property. So the way we looked at this was to maximize the density in these districts, in these blue areas already, and try to preserve as much of the character of Pine Street and Morse Court and Elm Street as we could. One of the ways we did that was to, within this red part, we limited the number of units that could be built on a parcel, no matter how big it was. So what we said was, no more than 5 units on any parcel in this red district. We also said, we don't want big buildings with as many as 5 units in it, so we're gonna require, if you want to put up 5 units on a property, you can't have more than 3 in one building. So if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have to have 3 in one and 2 in another. And I guess I should, at this point, describe what multifamily housing is for the state, because that's kind of an important thing. We often think of multifamily housing as people talk about Rantoul Street and so forth. Multifamily housing is a 3-unit residential building. We have a lot of them in town right now. There are 2 really good examples on Church Street. They are 3-story white buildings. Each of them has got 3 units in it. And that's the kind of housing we're hoping happens, if any does, along this red district. I guess that should take some questions out, people want to ask.
I think we should do it at the end.
Okay,
Let's just go through.
Do you also want to explain that, although we capped it at 5 units,
oh,
there's also a limit based on the size of the lot as to how many units you
yeah,
can have?
that's right. So the basic rule you're gonna see all night long is that you need 2,000 square feet of lot for every residential unit you build. So if you have a 6,000 square foot lot, which is about a quarter of an acre, roughly, oh,
No,
I'm sorry, that's an eighth of an acre.
yeah.
You could put 3 units, 2,000 feet per unit, 3 units, 6,000 square feet. And actually, 6,000 square feet is the minimum lot size in the downtown and in District D, which is along here already, so
So if somebody has a 3,000 square foot lot, how many units can they build?
they can
there?
do 1.5, but of course,
No,
there is no
no,
such thing.
no, zero.
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 Because you need a minimum of
Yeah.
You need to have
6,000.
6,000
If
to
you don't
start.
have 6,000
Trick
feet,
question, Gar,
you
sorry.
can't build anything there.
Okay. One other thing we said was that you can't, these are overlay districts, so there's existing zoning still stays in place under there. And we said you can't subdivide or recombine any lots unless they are, comply with the underlying zoning. So anybody who wants to fiddle around with a lot area to get more units won't be able to do it.
Do
Okay,
you want to talk about the unit cap? In,
the 5,
right?
Yeah, I
Oh, you
did, I
did,
did.
okay, all right.
We were sleeping.
I wasn't sleeping, but. Oh, thank you, Chris. Okay, I'm gonna quickly, actually, Sandy, you wanna do beach to sea?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is the Beach to Sea Street District, and like the Lower Pine to Powder House, it's got 2 sub-districts. Basically because the 2 neighborhoods are quite different. I mean, this is right downtown, it has Seabreeze Variety, it has a multifamily development, and it has a small shop. It's right in the middle of all the shops and restaurants. And one thing, so the limit on project size, the largest lot in the district is the lot where apartments are and where it's mixed use, where you maybe have your morning coffee at the Laughing Gull. And above the Laughing Gull are apartments. But if you go, so you've got a large building here and then several smaller buildings and on-site parking. On-site parking is part of the rules for all of this generally. And then the second largest area here is this where Stanley's and the Seabreeze Variety are. But given the limit that we put of you have to have at least 2,000 square feet of lot per unit, the most units you could have here is 10. And hopefully there is encouragement actually in the zoning. I don't remember exactly which section that it would be mixed use. So it would be, there's not a requirement, but there's an encouragement that on the first floor, you know, you would have shops and on the upper floor residences, much as you do on the west side of Beach Street. And then this district is, it begins at the National Grid substation and goes all the way up to where Spy Rock Hill Road intersects with Summer. And then it goes all the way down to C where Tappan is. And it takes in this corner where the old warehouses that used to be grain storage and then I think were used for some kind of moving business, Valentine Movers. And this district, because it is, even though it includes a substation, and it's kind of closer to downtown, certainly than Lower Pine, it's primarily a residential district, and it's on the edge of a residential district. So we put a fixed cap per lot on this. So that, for example, on the warehouse district, which is a fairly large lot, I think it's I don't remember the precise numbers, but it's over 18,000 square feet. That lot would be, I mean, how many units? 9, 10 more. There's a fixed cap of 4, and that's it. That's the most that could be built on that, according to zoning. So I don't know if you have any questions, but that it's very important to keep in mind those 3 things really that constrain the nature of the development that's going to happen, which is that there is a limit on the number of units based on lot size, number 1, that in the more residential units, there's a fixed cap, and thirdly, that there is a requirement, particularly in this zone, that you can't have with 5 units, you must have it in 2 buildings. 1 a 3-unit building, which is very typical of Manchester multifamily, and the other a 2-unit building. In fact, I think the property here has both a house and a barn, which is, so it's got 2 buildings on it already. Anyway, so I'm happy to answer any questions on this district later.
The one thing I should say, we haven't talked about height. And our current zoning allows for 2.5 stories or 35 feet. It remains the same except for in 2 places. And one is on the other side of 128, and the other is part of the district Chris was
The
describing,
blue parts.
the blue parts here. And that would be 3.5 stories, meaning 3 stories plus peaks. So otherwise, it's the same as our current zoning. So I'm just going to quickly
Are you
describe
gonna
now.
touch on parking too?
Sure.
Parking spaces?
So parking is also the same as our current zoning, 1.5 spaces per unit. Off-street is required, except for the Beaver Dam parcel, which is 2 spaces per unit. So Allen to Lincoln, this one was within a half-mile of the train station. Lots of multifamily housing already existing here. You start out at 66 Summer, which is the condos, which are offices. Dr. Mart's, Dr. Lamb, that building. Those are all privately owned office condos, so very little likelihood that that is going to be developed into residences. You walk down the street and you get to the Brook Street condo development, already multifamily housing, quite dense, individually, privately owned, those condos, again, hard to see that everyone would want to sell and someone would come in and replace them all with different multifamily housing. You continue on down, there's another small commercial building, which is currently for sale, actually, right here, right near the Memorial School. That property, I think, would be subject, if it was sold and turned into multifamily, it could be, I think, 5 units as many. Walk further down, these are single-family homes on the other side of the street. And then you cross the street, and these are in currently, cross the street and you get on the way to Lincoln. This is multifamily, these are multifamily, and then you have the gas station. The gas station actually is in zoning district A, which is residential. So it could never be built there today. But the gas station, if it were to be developed, it could have, I think, 6 units. Anyway, it could have a number of units, and that would be a nice short walk to the Memorial School from there. That's that district. The Beaver Dam District. Gar, do you want to quickly describe that?
Beaver Dam District, if you go across, you're going down School Street, you go over 128, and I think it's the second right, which is called Atwater Avenue. And you drive, and I encourage you to do this. It's very interesting to drive in there because a lot of people just don't go there. It's like where is this anyway?
But it goes to that.
Right, unless you go to the athletic thing. But anyway, so you go across, you take that second right, that's Atwater, and then you drive in quite a ways, and you take a left, which is called Beaver Dam. And you go in there, and I think it's 7.8 acres, but I might be wrong, something like that. Is that
That's
about right?
Sounds right.
I think so. And you go in, and there's some metal-clad industrial warehouse buildings, but I'm not really doing them justice. I think they look pretty good myself. And if you were to go in and see the insides, these are very professional storage buildings that the owner has spent a lot of money to make sure that they are what people need. They are fully occupied, and in fact, he is in the process of building another warehouse building in there, because the business is quite good. If you're in the industrial real estate business, you know the storage business is a great business, because we need it in this country. We need storage, and a lot of businesses in Manchester use that facility to park their trucks, to store their inventory, to be a base for their operation. So it's a very utilitarian and very professionally managed and maintained property. So we were really looking to fill out that number of units that we were required to zone, not build, just zone. And we needed about 100 units, Mark.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So we needed about 100 units, and we said, how about Beaver Dam? It's already developed. Nobody's gonna cut down a tree. There aren't any trees out there. If you go and look at the place, it's, completely developed. And it's very well maintained. And I have met, actually, very briefly, with some other folks. We went and met the owners of the property. They're very responsible, and I think they're good businessmen. So we think the likelihood they're going to take cash flow producing, successful income property. I love income property. Anyway, to tear it down and go in the speculative multifamily housing business is slim. And I actually have done a little bit of analysis on this. I don't think they can get more money by building apartments than they do running it as a storage. So we think designating the Beaver Dam 7.8 acres, which is the other 100 acres we needed to fill out the law.
Not
100 units.
Oh, 100 acres.
No.
Audience, thank you. Other 100 units that we needed to fill out was a perfect fit. And that's why we designated. Is it possible that someone
20 years hence.
might tear those buildings, but I doubt it, to tell you the truth. Anyway, that's kind of underlines the thinking we had. Let's comply with the law without wrecking our town. That's what we're trying to do. Sorry, I'll stop.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to talk about is in the zoning amendment, we put design guidelines. And these were drafted by a group of local residents who are architects. And, we don't have these applicable to other buildings in town right now. But these design guidelines have specific requirements that anyone who wants to develop their property under this zoning in the, it's actually 39 acres, because we couldn't divide up properties in the 39 acres. They're required to follow these rules that are in the design guidelines. And they're required to go through what's called a site plan review. abutters would be notified, there would be a public hearing with the planning board. And actually, most of the zoning, the pages of our zoning amendment are comprised of the design guidelines, but they relate to appearance. Let's make whatever is going to be built look appropriate to the neighborhood and to the town. Materials and other
Roof shapes,
roof shapes.
windows.
Not having some big slab of a building. There's a
Right.
lot about articulating the way the building, so it looks like Manchester.
Yes,
Are these design guidelines more or less stringent than the existing design guidelines?
we don't have design guidelines.
We don't have any design guidelines?
No, so these are more stringent. So we had, Gar just mentioned complying with the law, and I just wanted to sort of wrap up our comments with the discussion about that. As I said, it's a law. It's not like an option, Manchester, you see if you want to do this, it's a law. And our goal is to comply with the law, and we think we've done a good job of creating a plan that complies with the law but benefits Manchester. So there has been a lot of press and noise, and if you're on social media, you maybe see a discussion of Milton. And I just briefly want to mention that Milton, they are in a rapid transit community, so they were required to pass their zoning by the end of last year. And they did that. They have a representative town meeting, not an open town meeting like we do. So their representatives passed zoning, and then their citizens filed a petition for a referendum. And the citizen referendum overturned the plan that Milton's planning board came up with to comply with the zoning. So Milton is not in compliance with the law. They're in violation of the law. The law says that if you're in violation of the law, it lists out 4 pools of state grants that you are not eligible to receive. You violate the law, you can't apply for grants under these 4 sets of state grants. I got an email today from someone who's an attorney, but I haven't looked this up myself. But she said she discovered that Milton hasn't received funding from these grants for at least 10 years. So not really of much concern to them. It is of great concern to Manchester. And our finance committee did an analysis about the effect on Manchester of the loss of these grants. It's millions of dollars. We're counting on that money for next year. We're using that money right now. So losing the ability to get money through those grants would be a big hardship for Manchester. The other thing, and this is what happened to Milton, the Attorney General brought a civil suit against Milton to say, Milton, you must comply with the law. It's a law. Milton's response is not, the law is a bad law, throw it out, it's unconstitutional. That's not their response. Their response is the Attorney General doesn't have the right to sue us. Really, the only punishment we should have is not being able to receive money under those grants. I am not confident Milton will win that lawsuit, and they're spending a lot of money on attorney's fees to litigate that lawsuit. Things Manchester would like to avoid, and we can avoid by complying with the law with this plan that we have put together. Also heard about, well, let's wait till the court decides the Milton lawsuit, which should be in February of next year. Well, we're required to follow the law by January 1st. So as of January 1st, if we decided to wait and see what happens, even though I don't think whatever happens to Milton is going to affect Manchester, the law is still going to apply to us. if we wait, we're in violation of the law as of January 1st. We won't be able to apply for money under any of those grants then, while we sit and wait, see what happens in Milton. So right now, that position doesn't make sense to the select board or the finance committee.
Could I underline one thing that you said? I really think it's important to distinguish because what Sue is talking about with the suit, Milton is not challenging the law. They are challenging the guidelines that were written by HLC in response to the law. And the law itself has in it, you don't comply with the law and you are ineligible. So there's no question of risk, you're just flat not eligible for those categories of grants. And they're fairly significant in terms of the plans, both what's ongoing and the plans to repair infrastructure in this old town.
Thank you. And the last point I wanted to make on that topic is that let's say something happens with the Milton suit. The only thing that could possibly affect Manchester is if the court said to, Sandy just mentioned EOHLC, they're the ones who issued these guidelines. The court says, you have to redo those guidelines because you didn't do them the right way last time. So maybe those guidelines would be more beneficial to us than they are now. I highly doubt it. But if they were, remember, if we pass this zoning plan, it's our zoning. It's not the state zoning, it's our zoning. So we pass it, we can go back and change it. We can say, well, they changed the guidelines, so we want to change our zoning. We can do that. It's our zoning. So to me, there's not really a risk in going ahead and passing the plan, regardless of what happens with the Milton suit.
You didn't mention the affordable housing component.
I forgot about that. Do you want to describe that?
Yeah.
No, I won't make you do
I
that.
can. So one of the things that we did is we commissioned a report of a feasibility study to justify to the state that it would be beneficial to the town to allow 20% of the units to be affordable. And that report supported that. So any project with 5 or more units would need an affordable unit. So every 5 units requires an affordable unit. And the other thing is, with respect to the grants, is that any, like rehabbing the Newport Park or Plains, any of those types of affordable housing projects, 80 to 90% of those projects depends on money from EOHLC. So if we don't comply with the law, it's unlikely that we would ever have any affordable housing, be able to do affordable housing projects other than an unfriendly 40B. So I think that's something that has gotten lost in the woodwork, but that's something we would have an issue with.
That just reminds me, and this is the last thing I'll comment on. We did hire an independent firm to conduct an analysis of, okay, here are our districts. You tell us what is your guess, and it really is just a guess, of how many units could be built over time. And they said 134. They didn't give us the time frame. 100 out in the storage unit and 34 spread across these districts. So that's called a propensity for change. And you can read that on the website. There is a button that says MBTA zoning. All of this, all of the studies that Sarah described, the propensity for change study, the financial analysis, it's all there. And we also have some videos of each of the districts with a bit more statistical information on them.
The 20% Sarah mentioned is the maximum that HLC would allow us to require be affordable. And we had to do, the maximum they would allow was 10, but you had to do a special study, and if you did, and it came out that you could do 20%, you could. That's how we got to 20%, because we're pretty committed to assuring that some of this gets built, whatever gets built, has some affordable.
All right, time for,
I'll make
oh, Denny.
a couple of observations. With regard to whether this zoning could be overturned, I think it's instructive to remember that 40B, which is what we're dealing with up in Shingle Hill, has been on the books for 50 years. And it's the same concept of the state imposing zoning on us. That's withstood several challenges over those 50 years. So I think were we to decide as a town to not comply, the best we're going to get is a big legal bill and the potential to have somebody else dictate how we comply. So I think that's important to remember. The second point I'd make is sort of supplement what Gar was saying, maybe a little differently. Self-storage, I can tell you from experience, is extremely profitable. You get about the same rent per square foot as you would as if it was an apartment. And on top of that, you have a quarter of the expenses. So when you do the bottom line, most of those properties are making 15 to 20% cash on cash returns. The analysis that the independence firm did to decide what was likely, their benchmark for multifamily was a 6% return on cost. So 25%, 6%. You know, this is a hell of a lot more profitable, and it's also surrounded by wetlands. So I think, to think that there's going to be 100 units of multifamily there in the next, God knows how long, I just don't think it's possible. I just don't see that happening anytime soon. And I think, so the net is, in my view, if you take the rest, there's another 34 units that might get built. That's not so bad. You know, that's, you know, for something that's foisted on us, the fact that we can create a net gain of 34 units, that's a pretty good result.
So questions, comments, venting, we're ready for all of it. Christie, wanna?
Sure, yeah, so, sure, could you give us your name and where you live?
Yeah, I'm Peggy Strachan and I live up on Masconomo Street. And I wanted to ask you, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Sarah Mellish?
Sarah, could you explain again how 40B and 40A, and I never remember which is which, and so that's probably typical of everyone in town. Can you explain again how they interact, if they interact, and what the consequences are of the interaction?
Right, so what the state did with 40B is they said if less than 10% of your housing units in your town are not affordable, then a developer may make a presentation and for a project and override all local zoning in order to build a project.
That's 40B.
That's 40B, and that's what happened with SLV.
That's 40B.
Yeah, that included waivers of wetland provisions, all the local provisions. And that's what happened with SLV. And with SLV, the ZBA denied it because of the conservation sensitivity of the area. And that's now in legal limbo.
But you made a comment about we could apply for benefits from something housing, HLC.
Oh, yes,
There's a
so-
lot of initials being thrown
Right,
around.
okay, I'm sorry. So in order to avoid future 40B projects, we need to have more affordable housing in Manchester to equal 10% of our housing stock. Now, we're hoping with this 3A, this new zoning, that if that allows 20% of affordable, or requires it, that would help us. But in order to get up to the 10%, we need affordable projects. And affordable projects are done by often nonprofit entities. North Shores, CDC, Harbor Light, and when they put their proposals together, 80 to 90% of their financing comes through the same state agency that is mandating this new zoning law. So that if you don't comply with this new zoning law, then your developers are not going to receive those monies, which means we can't have any affordable housing built in Manchester in order to get up to that 10% to avoid those larger projects that override all of our existing zoning.
So this is another consequence in addition to
Right.
being in court, and
Right.
I think it's worth at the town meeting somehow, I know it's so complicated, but somehow stressing the consequences.
A good point.
Well, and when we looked, I also am chair of the finance committee. And when we looked at the grant situation, we felt that if the build out was over 20 years, it would be about 2 to 4 million in grants a year that we would forego. And that would result in a potential tax rate increase of between 6.5% and 13%.
So I would
So it's-
stress that as well.
So it's not small dollars.
No, I
And we also determined that allowing by approving the zoning, it would not really cost the town any money because the increased assessments recovered the expensive, primarily because we've lost 172 Manchester students in the regional school district in the last 4 years, and we have 80 school choice that come from other towns, so we have plenty of slots to handle between 5 and 9 new students a year without expense to the school district.
And I'd like to make another point too. We've been talking about trying to meet the legal requirements. But you know, we have housing needs in this town as well. And one of the problems we have is that we have a lot of almost all single-family houses, and they're being torn down and replaced with bigger, more expensive ones. And so there is fewer and fewer opportunities for my kids, your kids, for them to move into town. There's no place for a teacher or a first responder to afford a place in town. And we get to be older, we want to downsize, there's no place to downsize either. So we do need a variety of new, different kinds of housing so we can support our own population. And this isn't really going to do that, unfortunately, but it's a small step in the right direction.
Can I just make one other comment? How can you at the town meeting be ready to deal with NIMBYism? I mean, you know, I don't want 6 houses of 4 people living near me or whatever. I mean, it doesn't sound like this even comes close to producing anything like that, but this is the kind of thing that people start getting worried about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. All we can do is present the facts the best we can.
And I think you point to some of the developments that we've included in the zoning, the condominiums at 21 Pine Street. Those are nice condos. They're not inexpensive. All of Sawmill Circle, no developer is going to come in and redevelop it. That's nice.
Well, in 1012 Summer Street, everybody looks at that every time
Yeah.
they go get a scone at nothing
Yeah,
else.
and the Brook Street condos. I mean, those are all high density.
Are the ones behind the
developments.
church over here.
Right.
White
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
You don't even, they're just nice looking,
And by
style building.
limiting the number of units in a structure, you're forcing a much, you know, a much nicer look and feel for the units. And they're gonna be so expensive, they're not gonna be poor people living in them.
More questions?
What is the time?
Name and,
Oh, sorry, Ian Stratton, Peggy's husband.
okay,
What is the timeline that you expect any action to be taken? There are 12 people here that are presumably Manchester people, and there's very few, there's no interest in this. Are you expecting this to drag on and drag out for
30
20
online.
years?
No, there's 30. How many online?
30.
There's 30 more people online.
Just what?
There's people on Zoom.
Oh, they're on Zoom, but well, there are a few more. But, you know, this is
30,
Manchester, there are
This is the last.
3
Well,
more.
Yeah,
uh,
we've had other
30 more. 30.
30.
30 more.
We-
And they've
we've
had other
been-
meetings
we've-
too.
Yeah, we've
They've
been,
had other meetings before this.
yeah, we've been at this for about a year and a half now.
But how much
And-
longer do you think it's going to be before any action?
Oh, town meeting,
Town
November
meeting, that's it.
18th.
Next week, we're taking the vote.
That's it.
Yes, but the town meeting can come up with a conclusion that may be not consistent with the requirements.
it's possible.
Correct.
Possible, that would be
But that's,
unfortunate.
that's the end of that's the end of our mission.
Well,
So
On,
what happens then?
November 18th,
Consequences.
this task force has done its job. We've,
And so what do you expect? You have to give 2 alternatives, either status quo or failure. What happens in failure?
well, all the things we've been talking about, we're out of
When
compliance.
will it likely?
It begins January 1st. January 1st, 2025, we're out of compliance if we don't pass it. at
So,
town
but
meeting.
what happens after
well,
January?
we can't fix the water system. We
Right,
can't fix the rotunda.
right,
We
yeah.
can't dredge the harbor. We can't do the paving on whatever it is, streets out here. That stuff, you know, it's, things are gonna happen.
Well, I'm gonna answer that a
Tax
little
rate
bit
will go
differently.
up.
If we don't do it now, we're out of compliance with the law. The law is not going away. We're gonna have to come back in the spring and try try a different plan. Maybe somebody can come up with a better plan than this.
Well, and I think the other concern is
Oh, yeah,
that the
it'll be too late.
Sorry,
state,
say that again?
the state could do our zoning.
Yes.
It'll be too late, but sometimes it's better late than never.
Well,
I mean, I don't wanna be in violation of the law for the rest of the town's history. That would not be good.
So I'd just like to say, I don't really like this thing much,
It does.
right? But it exists. It's like, you know, a wave coming at your boat or something. You can't just sort of say, I'm not playing. You gotta deal with it. We're doing the best we can. And you might say, what you guys are trying to do is play the law and kind of live by the law, but not. I hope the state isn't listening to this. You would probably be right. We're trying to comply, and in fact, we submitted this thing to the guys in Boston,
from pre-application.
and they said, okay, all
There's
right,
there's
that'll
some
work.
comments.
If you get that approved, you'll be in compliance. So, you know, they're not, I'm not gonna.
Talk to your neighbors and make sure they vote yes.
Yeah, so, and, you know, it's really, does the town want to comply with the law or not?
Yeah,
You know, what,
well, yeah, in a way, I mean, there's been a certain amount of fuss about, oh, this is a state mandate, et cetera. But in fact, the state set some goals, some boundary conditions for us, but then left it up to the town to figure out where the 37 acres should be, what exactly the requirement should be. Should there be design requirements? That was our discussion. I mean, and Richard led a whole group of architects who tried to figure out what would really work, because you have to have very specific requirements. So in a way, while, you know, had the law not come along, none of this would be occurring. But we did have a lot of local discretion in terms of figuring it out how best to apply the law to Manchester.
And one of my concerns is in the Attorney General's suit, she asked for relief, and the first couple of items in the prayer for relief are about, basically that Milton should comply and make zoning. But one of the other things she requests, if they continue to refuse to comply, is that the court appoint a special master who would decide the zoning. And we certainly don't want to do that. That's in Milton's case.
And I think the other thing that people may not be aware of is that the state has always controlled our zoning. Every time we pass a zoning amendment at town meeting, it has to be approved by the Attorney General. So this is not new.
No. So is there any realistic estimate of when this might be resolved? No.
Next Monday.
November 18th.
No, but I mean, after Monday, whatever the outcome.
Well, if it's passed, we can change the zoning and nothing will happen,
We're done.
in my view.
Yeah.
It'll
that's what
be
I'm asking.
like, non-issue. Now, somebody might have a 8,000 square foot lot and they might have a house on it and they might say, geez, I think I can build, whatever it is, 6 units here.
Four.
For you.
Sorry, I have my patriots, they're quick to.
And maybe only
correct me.
3.
Some lots have to be in 2
That's
buildings.
So, but, I mean, our guess is, if this passes, which we hope it does, that there's a pretty good chance nothing's gonna happen.
Yes, question, yes, sir. Was it?
And then we need to take one online.
Yeah, did you, ma'am, do you have your hand up?
I
She
did.
did.
I did.
Can you tell us your name and your address?
Abigail Saltonstall, 17 North Street. My question is really, I can see that you guys have put so much thought into this, and it's a very conservative plan and very thoughtful. But then we come to the 40B and the affordable housing, and it does seem like you have so thoughtfully constructed these zones that there's going to be very little new housing. So I don't quite get the line of reasoning that how is this going to help with the 20% and the 40B, because where would the affordable housing go?
Okay, so very good question, actually. This is not designed to be a vehicle to produce affordable housing, just to be clear. This is just to produce housing, because the state, the justification from the legislature was that the state's economy is being hurt because of the shortage of housing in the Commonwealth. So that's what's pushing this. We're designing this so we're not. It's not that somebody who wants to put affordable housing can't do it. If somebody wanted to put in, 5 units of affordable housing and they got the financing, they can do that. We're not going to prevent them at all.
And there's areas of Manchester where that would be, I know people would.
Yeah, so there are 2
react,
places.
but
There are
very
2 very important places. One of them is Newport Park, which is up on Pine Street. The other is Powder House, which is at the end of Elm Street. They both are fully affordable now. They both have enough land that theoretically you could add more units there. And that's one of the reasons we zoned it that way, was so that additional affordable housing could happen in those 2 locations with the least impact on the rest of the town.
And if anybody wants to build 5 units on their lot, one has to be affordable. And they can't make a payment to the Affordable Housing Trust in lieu of making a unit affordable.
And there's areas of Manchester where you could put 5 units on your lot?
Yes, not a whole huge number, but yes.
And so now they're required to have 1 unit affordable if there's 5.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Robert Coyne, 115 Beach Street. I was the first one to buy a unit at 21 Pine Street. There was a radical thing at the time. Nobody thought you could ever put in, I don't know, 5 or 6 units here.
Yeah.
Expensive construction and so forth, but our local zoning, our home rule community voted on it, accepted it, and, the place has prospered. I don't live there now.
It's great.
But we have home rule, which I think is a major issue here. My concern is having the state, particularly the MBTA, which in itself is in debt, going to be in further debt. They're giving out free rides now. They just give out, I think, $40 million to the Cape Ann Transit Authority and the regional transportation authorities. But I just think that, to me, we have to defend our home rule. That once the state starts interfering with our local control, our local governments, it's not going to win.
I think Ann and Becky can.
If I may, Ann Harrison, I'm from the select board and I'm on the task force. Massachusetts has a home rule amendment to its constitution, which says specifically, as long as it complies with the laws of the Commonwealth. 40A, 3A is a law of the Commonwealth. Our home rule is very limited, and the state decides where we get it and where we do not.
And that can't be challenged. Yeah.
It's in the state constitution. Of course it can be challenged,
Yeah.
but you have to go to the state constitution, not to the Manchester town meeting.
We have a hand up online.
Yes, online, yes.
Susan Harrington was first.
Susan Harrington, 0 Woodhome Road. I think the information tonight has been very concise and easy to understand. One question that came up about design, would it be possible for design guidelines to be implemented into the permit review process for the town of Manchester?
You mean in general, besides in the?
In general, well, including this project, I mean, this proposal, as well as any building in Manchester, any new buildings or renovations.
Well, I think the answer to that is yes, that it could. That would require another vote of a different town meeting.
Yeah, true.
But there's no reason why it couldn't be applied to other.
Because I think that would, the other point I was thinking about, what frightens me is the possibility that the state could control our zoning.
Yeah, I think it's probably, frankly, not a big risk, but it's certainly possible.
Well, perhaps that's something that could be mentioned at the town meeting.
Yeah, sure, yes.
I think that would.
I think
a lot more.
I think the thing to do there is to quote the
prayer for relief.
Prayer for relief that the Attorney General filed in the litigation with Milton.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I believe there are approximately 20 towns that have said no, and they're postponing it until the Milton case is resolved. Or would you maybe enlighten us on that?
I don't know how many towns have voted to postpone it. I know Ipswich did, by one vote, actually.
Hamilton did, Wenham did, I think Winthrop did.
But how many have complied?
So I don't know the answer to your question of how many. I do know that 83 have already passed their zoning and are moving on to other things.
83?
83.
Is their time frame different than ours? The towns that passed, no?
Only
12.
Oh, the towns that said no?
Yeah, the
I
towns that
don't
are
know.
Postpone it?
I
There
don't
are
They're
know.
the same
There are
time. They're the same time frame. as
Yeah.
us.
So they're gonna have consequences
No,
by
they will.
postponing.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There are 3 deadlines. One was last year, and that was for towns that were served by rapid transit. The deadline this year is for communities served by commuter rail. And the 3rd deadline is for so-called adjacent communities. Essex, for example, is an adjacent.
But Essex has already passed theirs.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I just, one more question. On the Brady property, the 100 units,
Yes.
how much does that deduct from what is required in total, from what they're asking out of the 559? That's a big chunk.
It's a big chunk.
Yes, it is.
And I'm a customer there for about 40 years, Diamond Jim Brady. and his son's been running it. And I used to sell ocean containers as well. So I know the cost factors involved in what they're harvesting on Jim's efforts. But that to me is probably if this thing does get approved, that's probably gonna be, in my opinion, one of the key properties.
Well, Bob, do you think they'll shut it down?
Pardon?
Do you think they'll shut their business down?
Well, it was sell the land.
Why would
Why?
they? But wouldn't whoever bought it also want to run it? I mean, it's pretty profitable.
They're containers, and
Well,
for the most part, the two buildings are a little different.
well,
Those,
the
so,
new buildings they're doing are not just storage. They're sophisticated storage facilities.
Yeah.
that property, excuse me, that property is being redeveloped right now. He's keeping the existing large building. All those old trailers are being slowly removed from the property. He's in the he's beginning construction of a new building that's been already approved, that's gone through conservation.
It's very different.
Yeah,
from
It,
last
it
time.
is, it is much different than
Completely
what it looked like
Yeah.
before. It'll have parking, it'll have proper drainage, landscaping, it'll
And
be a vastly
It's
improved.
a big investment.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't been up there.
that new,
Yeah, it's right-
that
right
new
up.
building was approved by the ZBA, and as part of the approval, he was eliminating 54 trailers.
The others.
Oh, he was eliminating 54 trailers?
Yeah, in exchange for the new building.
No, oh,
So it's changing, all climate controlled.
The
Yes,
other
Oh.
side to the Beaver Dam property is that if it were built, it's the one place where we can be sure that there would be affordable housing.
yeah.
Because that one would require
Yeah.
that 20%,
20 units.
20 unit, if they built it out to the 100 limit, that would be 20 units of affordable housing. In the smaller places, people might say, well, I could build 4 instead of 5, because an affordable unit, I'm gonna take this is not affordable the way you think of it. It is not a nice landlord who's renting small apartments to people so that they can stay in town. This is a capital A affordable as defined by the state, and you have to meet a ton of requirements to meet the definition of a capital A affordable. These are what we are requiring people to build as if they build 5 units or more, a capital A affordable housing.
And that's what the 40B law requires, is the capital A affordable.
Okay, more question, yes, Jody?
Jody
Can
Morse.
I just want to make sure there's no one else online who's had their hand up for a while.
Alan had his hand up. I don't know if he took it down. Did you want to say something, Alan?
No, thank you. I just wanted to amplify Ann's response to the question of the amendment and zoning. Chapter 40A is referred to as the Zoning Enabling Act. It confers from the state the power to zone 2 towns. The state, not likely to do it, could repeal it entirely and reserve to itself the power to zone. The Home Rule Amendment is basically irrelevant to that issue.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, Jody, sorry.
Sorry, this is quick. Jody Morse, 11 Jersey Lane. So there have been a couple of letters in the Cricket. I'm sure people have been reading. And one was, I thought, had some interesting pieces of information that I'd like you to just address, because I think they're false. One was that senior housing is not allowed, and all of these units have to be at least 2 bedrooms. There are no 1-bedroom or studios allowed on these properties. Could you please
That's
say-
false.
Yeah, they're both
Yeah,
false.
false.
Thank you.
We can't, the law is ambiguously written, and it says that, well, I can't quote the exact law, but what it's saying essentially is that the zoning cannot restrict housing to require senior housing. And we're not doing that, so we're fine.
But you
And
can
we
do
s-
it if you want.
You could certainly do it if you wanted to, and you could build studios, all studios if you want.
I think the other thing is that the state compliance system, which is what we had to comply with, assumed 1,000 square feet per unit, including common spaces. So they say family friendly, but 1,000 square feet, including common spaces, is not particularly family friendly. So there's no restrictions on the size units you can build. You could build 2,000 square feet if you want, or you can build studios.
Yeah, the 1,000 square feet is the computer model that we have to use to comply with. And the model just assumes 1,000 square feet per unit. So if you, so that tells you how many units you can get when you plug in the properties into there and the density requirement that it just uses 1,000. Doesn't mean you have to build, if you have that big house and you want to add a couple small studios, so you get a little rental income in your older years and you can still live in your house, you can do that. So that, or you could do the opposite that Chris just mentioned. Builder could tear it down and build 2,500 square foot units, put 3 really nice units and sell them for $1 million each, $2 million each, probably close to that. But then that would allow someone who has a really big house to be able to sell it to a family, and they would have a place that they could move that might be a little bit smaller. So,
And just remember that, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yep, no.
What Mark just described, what you could do, the only people who can do that, who have this option, are people who own property in these 4 areas. That's all it applies to, are these areas.
More questions from Zoom land?
No hands up right now.
Going once, going twice?
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to come and learn about it. It's really complicated and confusing, and it's a lot easier to just say, I don't want to deal with this. So we really appreciate it.
You have put hundreds of hours into this.
You're gonna be glad. Okay, so the task force has got just one more thing it has to do with it.
Okay.
You don't have to say.
You don't have to say for this. The only thing we left to do is we have 2 sets of minutes to approve.
I have read the minutes,
So did I.
and I hereby make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I second.
Okay, any discussion on the minutes?
I think it's gonna happen.
All in favor?
Great.
Unanimous, thank you very much. And folks, this may be our last meeting.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I should have made cookies.
My one joy.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
Well, before we adjourn, I do want to just personally thank all of you for the work that you've done. It's been an interesting
It's an
year and a half.
interesting puzzle to
Great
solve.
Group of people. Democracy works because people like Elizabeth, you know.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Whew.